Thank you for tuning into the community conversation brought to you by Prototype Training System, home of CrossFit Prototype. Sim and I are back with another nutrition episode to help provide you with some education and strategies to better your nutrition. There's a lot of misinformation on nutrition, and we want to aim to provide you with some clarity. Today, the topic that we want to discuss is whether or not it's necessary to track your calories, track your macros, track your food, whether or not it's necessary to track in general. So let's see, this is kind of like more of a discussion than anything else. So I guess we can start with just going over our experience with tracking. I think we both have different experiences and it's kind of individualized. So Sam, why don't we start with, have you ever tracked your food?
So I think most people know now that I do not track at all. There was a period of time while I was going through my dietetic internship that I actually did a lot of tracking. And I've mentioned before in previous podcasts about how I tested out a bunch of different diets. So I was like really in tune with tracking when I was going through that experience to like learn about different things. But there was also a period of time where I just like tracked for my own benefit. I was like, okay, I'm going to stay like within a certain number of calories. Like I'm going to try to get so much protein. And so like my experience tracking is it's like a very stressful experience for me, like me personally. Like within the dietetics profession, it's like typically a bunch of like type A people. And like a lot of us who like go into this like in school, it's like food is very interesting to us for specific reasons. And so like for me, it was interesting because I'm like, okay, you can like treat a lot of diseases by eating food. But like when I turned around to do it for myself, it was like almost obsessive. And so like I felt like I wasn't being a good dietitian if I wasn't tracking properly and like all these things. So for me to like live in this world of like food is my life, to think about tracking, it was like very counterproductive. It
So
was
for
like
you,
I hated.
so for you, when you were tracking your food, it was like, you felt like, I don't know, maybe bad, or if you went over your calories, you felt like you were restricted in some way if you were tracking your food. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. It just felt like it was overwhelming to like constantly be planning out my meals. It was overwhelming to be like, oh my gosh, like I ate out and I don't know the content of this meal. Like for me personally, it was too much. And I felt this is a personal issue of like, I felt like to like, if I failed at this, I was like not a good dietitian. Like I was doing things wrong because so many people in the field are so like on top of things. And I'm not a type A person. I'm a type B person. And I like to do things. I like to be organized, but it just felt wrong. So for me, it was overwhelming. And so like, I don't track at all anymore. Just because like, that's not the way I enjoy living my life. I don't enjoy eating food in a way that like, I have to keep track of it because then it like makes me second guess myself. And that's a personal issue. And I'm probably not the only one that feels that way. So I will recommend it sometimes, but I don't do it.
Did you learn anything from tracking your food that helps you now?
So the interesting thing is I have always eaten a certain way, I think. For me, tracking didn't change the way I ate. It just made me stress out about the way I ate, right? Because I learned from a very young age. I came from a family of everyone in my family works in the medical profession, right? Where like nutrition was important. So I've eaten the same way my entire life. And so tracking only made me hyper fixate on it. And so I already knew about the way I ate just because of my education background, but I definitely think it has some positives for some people who like maybe don't always know like what they're eating and what they're putting in their body. Because I learned it in school, like I could rattle off like probably the calorie content of way too many foods. And I can tell you the protein content of way too many foods. And that's just because it's like a requirement for what I do.
Right.
But if I didn't have that background knowledge, like I know I have a lot of people that come to me and think like spinach is a protein source. Like it's a great way if you don't have that background knowledge, like if you don't have a degree in dietetics of like, oh, this is the food that I'm putting in my body. So yeah, for me, it wasn't a good thing. But I know for a lot of people it is. And so I think that's like a perfect way for you to talk about like your experience, John, tracking and like how that's worked for you.
Yeah. I mean, started tracking my food in 2014, and I still track, but I would say that I'm not as strict with my tracking as I used to be. I think it's because I've learned so much from tracking my food, like on what portion size and things like that look like. And if I had more of a specific goal of whether I was looking to lose or gain weight or whatever it was, maybe I'd be a little bit more diligent with my intake. But right now I'm just trying to like feel good and like just eat at like maintenance. So I've been a little bit more like intuitive, but I definitely have more awareness when it comes to certain things for sure. Like I like to have like peanut butter and bananas sometimes. Like I used to have like 3.5 times the serving size of peanut butter, just not knowingly, just because I'm like, okay, like I'm putting a tablespoon of peanut butter on like every little cut of banana. And that's still something I have, but it's just like a little bit more awareness. Like, okay, like if you don't have that basic awareness, then it can be really tough to be like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why do I like, I don't know, why do I feel like uncomfortably full after eating like this snack or whatever the reason is? And it could just be like just unaware of like portion sizes when it comes to certain things. That's helped me a lot. But yeah, I don't track my food like religiously anymore. I also have kind of, it's allowed me to understand like how to be able to get the amount of protein that I want to get in a day, from having that experience of tracking my food very consistently versus if I were to just track my food like one day a week, I'd probably still not fully understand like how much protein I should be having or whatnot. It's just helped me like form kind of like better systems for myself. And if I have I usually have like a similar breakfast and a similar lunch most days. I might have like a few different meals, but they're usually around the same like nutrient quality. So then it kind of like makes it easier to like estimate if I go out to dinner or something like that. I used to be so strict in my tracking that I was like, I would have like half a Swedish fish to to go ahead and hit the carb to like the number. And then I'm just like, all right, like I'm just like ballpark range it because like what's like here and there a little bit is I've also like learned a lot more since 2014 of your carbs and your fats and things like that. Like they don't have to be like an exact amount. You can go ahead and have more carbs or less carbs based off your food preference, and you can go ahead and still like maintain good performance and whatnot. So that's
So
something that
John, on the introduction of tracking in your life, were you trying to like track anything specific, or it was just like you went all in and you were tracking everything all at once?
I started tracking my food because I followed paleo, and I was like, okay, like these are the foods I can have and these are foods I can't have. And then I started listening to this guy, Lane Norton, who I still follow to this day, listen to all the time. He's like my favorite person to learn from when it comes to nutrition. And he's talking about like flexible eating and like how like this is like something that you can go ahead and do with and still, make progress with your goals, whether it's build muscle, lose fat, or whatever it is. And I was like, cool, like I can have a bagel again. Like this sounds great. Like I'll go ahead and just monitor my calorie intake. And that's what I did. And I was like, this is great. Now I can. And there's just so much more that I've taken away from it, but it's given me a better relationship with food. That for you, it sounds like the opposite. It sounds like it was a little stressful for you. For me, I now have a better relationship with food, that I can have a bagel and not feel like, okay, like I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be unhealthy. I'm going to be sick. Like I'm putting bad ingredients in my body, like whatever it is. And now I can be like, okay, like having like a balance of all these things. It's also good to understand too, that if your diet if you're tracking your stuff and you realize that you're hungry all the time and how many calories you're consuming, you can also be like, okay, like maybe I'll look at my, like what I've actually eaten today. If it was like Dunkin' Donuts, like breakfast sandwich, and then it was like, microwave pizza, and it was just like all these things that aren't overly filling and just very tasty, kind of, we can be like, all right, maybe we can try to move some fruits and vegetables in here and try to go ahead and increase the quality of food that we have. It's just like tracking your finances. How I look at it is like, I wouldn't buy something unless I knew that I had money for it. But at the same time, like, I feel like I don't need to religiously look at my bank account to know like how much, like what my allowance is, if that makes sense. And that's kind of like what, how I like look at food at the moment is like, fine to have this, like, in, you know, moderation and things like that. But it's also good to understand, like, it can add up quickly if you don't have that awareness. So
yeah, absolutely. So that's like good, because it's like for you, it was a really good tool of like, you were able to use it to kind of get a like baseline understanding of what was going on with like your intake. And I feel like that's like a perfect way to look at it, of like, tracking your food is a really good tool. And like the reason it wasn't good for me is because then it was stressing me out. And so it was like not a tool, and it didn't change my habits at all. It was just a stressor. Where it's like, I had the data, I like probably knew it, but to see it there in front of me was just like, nope, too much, not an important part of my life.
yeah, not
But then
everyone should track
again,
their food.
yeah, then again, like, I'm not everyone else. And like, there are people that I would absolutely recommend tracking food to. And like, you're the perfect example of like, that worked really well for you to kind of get an understanding of like, how to meet your goals and like how to be consistent, and like just generally education on food, versus like someone else, like, I don't know, trying to think of like a good example. When I was like coaching for a while, like I was coaching college athletes, of like, they're elite level athletes, but like I was coaching female, like swimming and diving, right? Like females who are in bathing suits all day, every day. So I wouldn't introduce that into their life, because like, I don't want to make that something that they're hyper focused on, because like their sport is very much about like the way they look, right? And like they're walking around in bathing suits all the time. And so like, that's a situation where like, it's not an appropriate one. So if one of them came to me with a nutrition question, I wouldn't say track your food. I would say like, let's try to increase your protein by doing this. Let's try to make sure that we're eating foods that fuel you by this, right? Because it's just like a different kind of person. And so it's like a very individualized, like who tracking is appropriate for. Because for some people it's a tool, for some people it's a slippery slope. And it's just like making a discerning decision of if it's the right choice for you based off of like who you are as a person and like what your end goals really are.
Right. I also think too that it can also be a useful tool for people that have chronically underate, that are chronically under eating, and they don't fully understand that they're like the amount of food that they're having is, you know, not, it could be the biggest reason why they're struggling with how they feel, you know. Like going through the process of a reverse diet can be something that can be useful, having like accurate like tracking methods, versus just being like, okay, you need to eat more, and then you go ahead and just, I feel like there can be more confusion with either way, whether you're tracking or not tracking. It can be like confusing to go ahead and be like, okay, well, how much should I be eating? It's just like, well, just eat whatever you feel like eating. And if someone has like chronic dieting history, like, well, I feel like eating a box of cookies every day, sometimes it's like, okay, like, you know what I mean? It really does depend on the person. If someone has an eating disorder, yeah, tracking their food is probably not the best thing for them, because then it gets them hyper focused on food again. You know?
Yeah, full disclosure, it's not. If you have an eating disorder, please do not track your foods. Please come talk to us. Yeah. Don't track your foods.
You know,
sorry to interrupt.
talk to Leah if you're struggling with
yeah.
like something like that. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the individual. I know a lot of people that there's like, you know, I'm struggling, like I don't understand why I can't lose weight, and then they're like eating 1,300 calories, and it's like, well, your body's super conservative with burning calories, because it's just like a survival mechanism. Like your body doesn't want to expend more energy because you're just giving yourself so little and doing so much activity. So like if you have like a little bit of data to understand that you're not eating not even nearly enough, then, you know, it can be useful. But you're right, like it depends on the person. And I don't like to make assumptions on the person either. You can whether or not it's like, you definitely shouldn't track your food because you're going to get an eating disorder, or you should track your food because it's going to be helpful. it should really kind of like be based off of what that, where someone is at. Like if someone is like super stressed out about eating an apple, like they don't need to worry about tracking their food. Like they need to go ahead and they need to work on their relationship with food, and probably have a coach to help them with that type of stuff. And Leah's doing a great job working with all these young girls that are struggling with that type of stuff. And yeah, I doubt that Leah's having any of those girls track their food. Probably not.
You know, that would be counterproductive. I feel like the best way to think about it is like, if you think of the world in black and white and there's like no gray area, I feel like tracking is probably not the right choice for you. Like if you like are content like living with the gray area, like rolling with the punches, like going with the flow and like being flexible, then tracking really does like give you some benefit where you like know it, you use it as a tool, but you give yourself some leeway, right? Of like, if you know that you are an all or nothing person, like we don't want you to go all in on the tracking. And then that's how it like leads down the path of disordered eating or like body dysmorphia or eating disorder. But if you're able to like live in that gray area and like take it for what it is and like use it as cool data points to help you reach a goal, then like tracking's probably for you. Because really at the end of the day, like if someone has a very specific goal, I think of like professional bodybuilding as like the perfect example, because people who do that for a living are like always tracking everything. There's like very specific bulking phases and cutting phases. And, there's a lot that goes into it that requires perfect tracking. And so like, that's an example of like where there's a very specific goal. And so there's like a very, very specific way to get there, and tracking is the tool to help them do that. Now, is the healthiest way to live life? I don't know. But that's like a situation that I would say perfect example of where tracking is important. But for the like person to person, case by case basis, my answer, as always with everything in nutrition, is it really truly depends on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Depends on what do you prefer? If like, yeah, like you said, if like, if it helps just having that, that data of like, okay, like this is what you ate this week, and you can just look at it as like data, then cool. And then you can adjust that based off of, what your goal is. If you're like, yeah, I want to gain weight, then you can go ahead and use tracking as a tool to help you like increase your calories a little bit, but make sure that you're not just, doing the old classic bulk where you're just drinking a gallon of milk and, what a day and doing that, which, it's, it is a tool, and it also got to like meet your lifestyle as well. Like someone that has like a very, I guess one could be like someone that, let's say they're a doctor or a surgeon or something like that, and they like, or a shift worker, and they're like, their schedule's all over the place. You probably, tracking your food might be a little bit difficult at times to go ahead. Like if you're a surgeon and you do a 16-hour surgery and you miss a meal, the last thing that you're thinking of is like tracking your food, right? That's why it's, for that person, maybe not the best approach. For that person, maybe intermittent fasting is a good plan for them. Like if that's what their regular schedule, like it could, and honestly, it depends. And that's always what we should be thinking of, is it depends. There should never be an absolute of like, no, you shouldn't track your food, or yes, you should track your food. It should be like, well, it totally depends on you, your mindset around it, and also just like how you're using it as a tool. If it's like destructive in any way, then it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. And I think like that's why nutrition ends up being so confusing, because like the answer is always, it depends. Like even from client to client, I can be talking to two people back to back and I tell them different things because it's different for the person. And so like all the nutrition messaging coming at you from like, well, from us for one, but like also anywhere on the internet, anywhere from social media, like books and diets, like there's so much information. And like the reason it's probably so confusing all the time is it because like every single person probably needs a different message because every single person is different when it comes to nutrition. Like there's by and large grand sweeping information we can give to people, like get enough protein, eat your fruits and vegetables, drink enough water, sleep well, you
It
know,
really
like,
is difficult to get like your message across on social media, right? Because like
yeah.
people have like read some of our blog posts before and they're like, so are they telling us to just eat junk food? Like how dare they? Like, no, we're saying like that it's okay to have those things in moderation. It's basically like the summary, but like if you read something in just like a little blip on the internet, sometimes you're not always like fully understanding what the message is from what you're reading. So if someone's online saying, the benefits of tracking your food, and then there's someone else is saying the reasons why tracking your food may not be working for you, you're like, okay, like I'm confused as shit because I just read 2 different posts in a row about opposite stuff.
Yeah. And like, I think that's good. Like we're talking about like 2 ends of the spectrum, right? Like tracking can be great. Tracking can actually be terrible. And like people fall anywhere on that spectrum. And so like, even within our own podcast, like, yeah, we probably have some contradictory stuff because the messaging goes different to different people. And so like, this is why always we're like, it depends on you. You have to come talk to us because like, we can give you the message that's really, truly appropriate for you. Because at the end of the day, really, aside from those like 4 major things, like eat your vegetables, get your protein, drink your water, and sleep well, like we can't give sweeping generalizations. That's like a really hard thing to do, and it's like it's frowned upon. That's like not the way we do things here. So like this is a way to get you the information that you need to know, but also to encourage you to come talk to us if you have more specific questions.
Especially if you disagree with us, have a conversation with us.
Yes.
Right?
I love when that happens.
The open conversation is how we can actually learn versus just making assumptions on what someone's saying. So if you're confused by anything that we're saying, if you're confused by what we're saying, whether or not you should track your food or not, whatever it is, ask us questions. Like, we're happy to help you. We're happy to have an open conversation and see your point of view. So we can, maybe have a better understanding of what you're confused about, or maybe we need to be educated about something. But ask questions and Sam, anything you want to add at the end?
I don't think I have anything else. John, do you?
Do not.
No. Awesome. So to wrap it up nicely, I do want to recap. Today we talked about tracking. Do you need to track your food? Like we said, the answer is it depends. And because it depends, that's why you should come talk to us. If you have questions about anything we talked about here today, or anything we've talked about in previous podcasts, or just about nutrition in general, please come find us. We touched on a little bit, like if tracking is become a struggle for you and you're struggling with disordered eating or eating disorders, please reach out to us. Or you can even reach out to Leah. She's been doing great work with the Empowered program, and she's definitely someone to use as a resource. With that said, if you have other suggestions for future topics, please do let us know. We like to talk about the things that interest you. So reach out with that as well. And I think that's all we have for you. So have a great day.